right, hello and welcome to another Antelope Node Operators Roundtable call. We only have really one topic to discuss today, aside from our typical status updates, which is where we will start off. So the Leap 5.0, which I think will blend seamlessly into the topic, which is sort of migration plan for upgrading to 5.0. So 5.0, the vast majority of the work for 5.0 has been complete actually for a few weeks now. So that's kind of been stable and baking. There has been just one outstanding issue that is being worked on currently that requires some changes to the brand spanking new BLS libraries. Those library updates are now complete, but there's the downstream work to integrate it into back into the Leap repository for the release candidate 3 is currently underway. So it should be within the next week or two that those changes are done, and we'll be able to push release candidate 3 out, but there won't be any recent new changes in release candidate 3 that we haven't already discussed on previous calls. So that's where we stand with that. As far as the migration plan goes, the point was raised recently about OC, and so we have as a refresher, we have a new setting that is the default value, which is ESVMOC enable equals auto, and that's the default. And what happens when you have that default is that OC mode is enabled sort of selectively based on context, whether you're a BP node, whether you're running EOS.io.star contract or something else. The question that was raised around this is, what happens in a heterogeneous network? So, some folks upgrade to 5.0 and other folks have not yet. I've discussed this with the team, and there's a few sort of conditions sort of at play at where this would even potentially be a concern, and it does depend on heavy network load in terms of the amount of CPU cycles crammed into blocks, right? So anytime you have sort of a less than underload, this wouldn't be an issue in the first place. The other thing is that, of course, the enable option, turning it on sort of manually in previous versions, obviously is still available because we didn't change previous versions with 5.0, obviously. And so what that means is that we will need to, and we'll put this in some communications to make this clear. In the event that a network underload begins to have issues where some nodes that are on earlier versions are having trouble keeping up with 5.0 nodes, which are more memory efficient, more CPU efficient, with OC, more CPU efficient, particularly for the system contracts, EOS.io.star. And how that might manifest is nodes dropping blocks, right? Because they can't keep up. In the event that happens, the recommendation there would be for nodes running earlier versions to set ESVMOC enable on. And by doing that, they would be able to, keep up with the faster throughput that 5.0 is now capable of. We'll go into more detail in a piece of content that clarifies this so that community folks are armed with that information in the event that it happens on an Antelope network, and can sort of help spread the word and get people either upgraded or configured in a way that they can keep up.
But even if they're configure like enabled for non 5.0, that raises its own concerns, and not only when it's overloaded, even under load, because it's just going to give bad like subjective billing, or if it's a front-facing API, it might let through transactions that shouldn't be let through. Or it's an issue you deal with anyway due to the diversity of machines running.
That's also why we didn't enable OC to begin with.
Yeah, the way I see it, as long as producers enable it,
yes, yeah, that's
the history is not going to be affected because they all use OC already, and it's really the peers could be a little bit behind, which is not the end of the world.
Right. No, that is true. The most important thing, the crux of this, is getting getting the majority of producers to do the upgrade, and then this won't be a concern. So,
and that's only on large load of system. And realistically, here we're talking about token transfers, partly, but also EOS EVM.
Right. Yes, also an important. There's a reason why the auto mode is selective about which contracts will automatically use OC, and that's because it's a sort of a smaller footprint, more known scope, I guess is a better way of putting it, of what is running in that optimized environment. And so yeah, we are talking about system contract stuff. So mostly it would be like transfer transactions that we're going to see, which is obviously a very limited scope in the first place. Any other thoughts or questions on this one?
You mentioned at the beginning that it would, like the OC auto, will be dependent on the machine, if it's a producer or not, as well as if it's running system contract. But my understanding that it only depends if it's an EOSIO system contract or not, regardless of your configuration of your node and what its task is.
Right. So let me bring up.
No, I mean, you can set EOSIO OC to enable on 4.0 or 5.0, and then it applies to everything. It's only if you set it to auto, then it's off for everything except for EOSIO, then it's on.
No, right, but I'm asking about the automatic auto, or just setting it to auto in 5.0. I think that will only affect system contracts regardless of configuration.
So specifically, we're talking about when applying blocks. OC applies always unless you're running in producer mode, and then it applies only if the contract is EOSIO.star, if you're running auto. Does that make sense?
And if you're not a producer?
Then it will always be running OC.
But only for system contracts.
No.
No, across the board. Yeah.
So
Right.
auto actually enables OC for all contracts, unless you're a producer, it only applies it to system contracts.
Right. So,
But
and
what
so
about an API node? When you're submitting a transaction, that would then get the wrong.
Yeah, that's the
situation.
next
so
question.
there's speculatively executing. There is a caveat for speculative execution, which is baseline, unless the account is ESIO.star. So baseline meaning
Right.
not OC, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably easiest to look at the table that Brian's looking
Yeah,
at.
let me
You
let me
might put
share
that somewhere.
this.
Yeah, so it's a bit complicated, but yeah, the idea is that every node, when it's validating a block, so when it's consuming a block that's been produced by someone else, it will evaluate that entire block using OC, except for if you're a producer. If you're a producer, then it will not evaluate the entire block using OC. It'll evaluate the entire block using what we call baseline, or whatever you have it configured to use. Now, the exception is across the board in every situation, everywhere, EOSIO.star uses OC. So no matter, so regardless of everything else we say, EOSIO.star everywhere uses OC. And then it's different. So if you're an API node, when you're bringing in blocks to update your state, you're going to use OC to consume that block. But speculative transactions that are coming through the API, HTTP transactions, they will run according to baseline, which is whatever the configuration is. For auto, that's going to be non-OC for those transactions. So everywhere, all peers, all nodes will consume a block using OC, except for any node that's configured to produce, in which case it does the more conservative thing of evaluating an entire block using non-OC, except again for EOSIO.star.
Right, that makes a lot of sense. So basically, non-producing machines are OC all the time, except when they have to handle the billing to make sure it's in accordance with the producer. It will be baseline. Otherwise, it's using OC because at the end of the day, it's just verifying it's not producing. But the producer will only do OC on EOSIO system contracts. I think that's great. Like, let's load on normal non-producer nodes across the board of any contract.
Right. And I said that's the more conservative approach. Like we discussed having like even producers consume blocks using OC. But by not doing that, by keeping producers evaluating blocks with non-OC, then an OC produced block, like even if someone has OC enabled equals true on the producer, if that for some reason would contain a poison transaction, well, the rest of the nodes on the network, the BP nodes, which are the ones that matter, are not going to validate that block. In which case, it's not going to reach LIB. It's going to be forked out because the rest of the node operators. So as long as the rest of the node operators are running auto or running off, either one, I guess, then a poison block like that will not make it into the chain. So as long as 2/3 of the producers are running correctly, then there's no possibility of a poison block reaching it. And even the idea of a poison block is extremely it is unlikely. I won't say it's extremely unlikely, but it's unlikely anyway. But this is the more conservative approach.
Challenge accepted.
Yeah. The spin on that I'll say is that we have headroom to have even more execution happen with OC, giving us even more potential transaction throughput. But of course, we're being conservative to ensure that we don't create situations where nodes can't keep up. So
And that if there are those situations, they will just happen at, like the node side might see something like before it ever reaches or be executed by a producer. So it also helps you test for eventually maybe enabling OC at the producer's level, like enabled for everybody.
Yeah, and so coming back to what my original point in bringing this up is that, you know, so in the event that we have sort of a mixed network and some folks don't upgrade, which is, you know, not unlikely, right? The one way to handle that is, of course, previous versions already support just enable, right? So that's an option that folks can run with if they're running sort of non-BP mode or nodes. Ideally, BPs will make the upgrade to take advantage of this feature, other CPU optimizations, parallelization, memory efficiencies, etc. So.
But if a producer doesn't upgrade and the network is under load of like non-USIO contracts that are basically using OC enabled in the non-upgraded version, he risks that some of these blocks may not be verified by the rest of the producers.
Yeah, so the risk would be that BP nodes, hang on, let me make sure I'm not misspeaking. 1 second. Right, so if a BP does not upgrade, they would of course not be running OC for EOSIO.star transactions. And so the risk would be that under load, you know, lots of transactions, there's lots of transfers, for example, right? They wouldn't be.
I meant if they're running OC enabled. So if a producer that did not upgrade to 5.0 and is running under OC enabled, then they might have a block that won't be verified by the OC enabled, like if it has a lot of non-system contracts, transactions, then he risks that the other producers won't validate that block.
Right, yes, exactly.
Because, yeah, okay, got it.
Correct. Yeah, so ultimately there's also a little bit of sort of back pressure here where like if a network is consistently under load in a mixed environment, the BPs that have not upgraded may ultimately sort of feel pressure to upgrade due to dynamics like that, right?
And they should upgrade.
Mm-hmm.
If there's a load, then
right.
Upgrade.
All right, so also on migration guide, Michael, you brought up sort of the overall sort of migration plan for 5.0. Did you have specific questions that you wanted to dive into on that topic?
Sorry, I lost you on one of my screens. The timing of any expectations, I guess, was really, I know we were kind of aggressively shooting for it and trying to smash it out every week, but obviously we at least I have taken my foot off of the gas, but I haven't circled back around. I'm not even sure when the last time I saw kind of a rework. What are we shooting for? Are we really just RC testing until we feel comfortable and drop it out there? I mean, it may not be an aggressive.
Yeah, so you know, stable is at least a few weeks away because RC3 is probably about a week away, or maybe a little bit more than that. And of course, I wouldn't expect the majority of node operators to upgrade until stable. But of course, the more folks who pound away at the release candidates, the more stable can be. So thanks to folks who do that. There are folks, I'm like cough, Matthew, Darwin, cough, right, who are using 5.0 in production, but not for block production, right? So, you know, and 5.0, you won't really see changes between RC2 and stable that you know, that are particularly substantive, right? So you can especially, I should say RC3 in particular, once we get to RC3, you know, that's a reasonable way to pound away at the release candidate, but I would not move to running a BP node on a main network at this stage until we get to that stable. As far as test nets go, when we get to RC3, you know, we'll start asking again about folks upgrading on test nets for non-production nodes, and then ultimately for production nodes. But as far as timelines go, again, you can, you know, there are examples again of folks running RC2 in production for non-producer nodes. So you're welcome to do that now on any network, especially test nets. Or you can wait about a week or two, and we should have RC3 available, which might be a good time to do that instead. And then dependent on the amount of folks who do that, and sort of the confidence that we can get there, stable should not be a large gap from when we push RC3. But that would be the sequence. I would say first non-production nodes on test nets, then, you know, non-production nodes on a main net and or production nodes on test nets, and then finally production nodes on main net.
We're ready to upgrade everything. Just waiting.
Excellent. Yeah, so the majority of the issue reports right now are coming from Matthew, and of course that's because he's actually running this. So yeah, of course that means he's going to run into stuff, right? But none of the issues reported are critical anymore. There were critical issues, but those are now patched and or you know, fixed in RC3.
Yeah, just for everybody on the call, we're running RC2 plus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, where you've taken some of the stuff that we have in RC3 and applied it to RC2 on your own build, right?
I just took the latest 5.0.
Oh, gotcha. You just built latest. Yeah. So you're basically running RC3 before we've tagged it as such, right? Yep. Eric or Kevin, anything to add?
I don't think so. Just appreciate the continued testing. If there's, you know, any hot topic that people think needs to go into the, you know, the RC, let us know.
Prometheus issue from yesterday.
Yeah, I noticed that one. I had it up on my screen actually just before the call. So I'll take a look at it. Well, all right. I think we've covered the status update and the main discussion topics that we gathered. Are there any other topics folks want to get into on this call? All right then. Well, as always, we appreciate your active participation both in these calls and in the community channel, Antelope Node Operators Roundtable. Your feedback really guides the development of LEAP. And so, as always, we appreciate your help and participation. And with that, we will end the call and we'll see you next week. Thanks, everyone.